Well, welcome everybody. It is Monday, November 13th, and we're doing a slightly later version of This Week in Crypto. I'm Dave Weisberger.
I'm Carl Savage.
Jacob Tover.
And we're from CoinRoutes here to bring you last week's news and market recap. Why don't we start with the markets, Jacob?
Yeah, it's a pretty active week in the market. We had the S&P up 1% last week. We had oil, Brent, down 5%. Gold up 2.5%. We had Bitcoin up 6%. Ether up 8%. And then something we also want to mention was the ETH-BTC pair over the last 3 weeks is actually up 10%. Sol BTC is over the last 3 weeks up 50%. And the dollar is up 75 basis points.
Right. Now, of course, the biggest reason behind the Ether move you're talking about is Blackrock. So, I mean, you know, they filed for a trust. They haven't done the filing with the SEC yet. That should come out, I think,
A week from now. Well, last time they did this, so this is something we were talking about off air, but last time they did this with Bitcoin, they set up a trust in Delaware, and it was a week later that the ETF letter came out, and you know, Bitcoin went from 25 to 31K. So, you know, we're expecting something similar here with Blackrock as they just set this up in Delaware.
Now, it'll be interesting in this case because we don't really know what's going to be in the filing. Are they going to include staking rewards, for example, to create a dividend for the Ether ETF holders? Could be very interesting if it happens. Obviously, there's a lot to be said, but I wouldn't want to be short Ether going into Wednesday or Thursday.
No.
I'm not saying that it's going to jump like Bitcoin did, because I think the jump actually happened last week when they filed the trust. But people in crypto, well, you know, they tend to react to news, right?
Yeah.
You know, speaking of reactions to news, I mean, a couple of crazy things that happened last week in the market. One crazy and one not crazy, but really interesting. You mentioned Solana up 50%.
Yeah, so two things here I'd like to talk about. I mean, first, I'm going to collect my clout here and say that last week we speculated. My forecast was the capital rotation moves right into, you know, the large cap altcoins, and we saw that with Solana, we saw it with Chainlink, and we saw it with Ethereum. So that's the first thing. And the second thing that's really interesting is that after Sam Bankman-Fried gets convicted, you know, he was a large proponent in the initial rally for Solana at $3 or whatever that tweet was, you know, for SBF to get convicted and then Solana to rip like it did. You know, FTT doing something similar, which is, you know, a story in its own, but two important things there.
Yeah, I mean, look, Solana is ripping because people now believe in the technology. And it's funny because last year, you know, Solana, every time it went down and it had a few incidents, people would like laugh at the technology, but that was, it went down, it was trading between 90 and 110 or thereabouts. I know those numbers because I bought at both of those numbers. And only bought a tiny amount when it went below 15 down into the single digits. So I kind of understand, but I don't really own a whole lot of crypto anyway. We don't trade a whole lot here. But the fact is Solana is a hell of a story.
Yeah.
But the other story, you mentioned it really quickly, is FTT. Can I just say FTT going from $1 to over $3 because Gary Gensler said that it's okay if FTX gets restarted? Maybe one of the most degen stories I've ever heard.
I mean, it's pure speculation too at the end of the day, and something you mentioned off air was it kind of shows the animal spirit of the market, and I completely agree with that. There's a bunch of speculators on the sidelines, money waiting to be piled in, and we don't know for sure, but I think it's fair to assume that this was mainly retail-led. There's not a lot of big institutions where FTT passes their risk profile assessment.
We don't even know if FTT token, and if you restart FTX, if they even have to honor it. We have no idea. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just think it's kind of crazy. But we've seen this before. You see it in the stock market.
Yeah.
You know, with bankruptcies. You know, I've seen bankrupt stocks go from a penny or two to $3 or $4, and then of course back to like 0 or a penny or two. So I mean,
I think one thing we can count on is FTT is going to be extremely volatile every time some news comes out about what FTX is doing, right? What they just did to Bybit, suing them for $1 billion.
Yeah.
So, you know, FTT is going to respond in a, you know, aggressive way every single time something comes out.
So that was the big news of last week. But a couple of other really interesting stories. One of them is the CME. The Bitcoin future open interest actually flipped and is now the largest derivative contract. And in digging into that, I wrote an article, it's on blog.coinroutes.com, about looking at the premium of the CME futures during the market move on Thursday. Without going into enormous detail, what I can say is this. traders using CoinRoutes spread algo made a lot of money because the spread moved from $200 to $400 and back to $200, not in a blip, but in a tradable manner. And that manner, as it went to 400, was a prediction of the market moving higher, and as the spread started coming down, the market started coming down. So in addition to making money on the spread, if you were watching the internals of the market, you could trade directionally based upon what derivative traders are doing. So that was the first thing that we noticed in the big market move, and I think that matters.
Something to comment, sorry to interrupt, something to comment on that is I was reading an article on Cointelegraph, and a quote I liked was, it's interesting to see instead of the hoodies, it's the suits now. Meaning that with CME, we're seeing obviously a lot more institutional money, a lot more traditional shops, where CME is the only place they can really trade Bitcoin. So seeing that interest from those parties definitely gets us excited, and for the first time ever, it's interesting as well.
I mean, the data is very clear. The premium that the CME has over the spot is fairly sizable, even at $200. And to put it in perspective, if you do the interest rate calculation, and all this is in the blog post, it's more or less double interest rates. So there is buying pressure in the United States in Bitcoin, full stop. And that could be from major firms hedging derivative bets that they've made, OTC derivatives with people. There's lots of ways it could happen. But the reality is that is now a feature of the market just as much as in the old days when Bitcoin would rip. It was always go up at night when Asia was awake and come back down again when the US was awake. That is not the case anymore.
So what I think is really cool is that CoinRoutes gives you the availability and opportunity to take advantage, right? When you see massive premiums come out between the CME and the spot, or between perps and the CME, right? CoinRoutes allows you to spread and take advantage of these arbitrage opportunities, and flatten them as the expiration date gets closer. So
yeah, I mean it's crazy. The other thing that you see that I was looking at Thursday were two other things. The first one were the funding rates on all of the inverse exchanges, all the perpetual swap ones. Most important being Deribit, because it updates its funding rate in real time. And when the funding rates were when the market was moving higher and it went over 38,000 on Bitcoin, the funding rates got high, and then the funding rates reversed before the market started coming down, and then the markets came down and massively overcorrected down to almost 35 before stabilizing back in the near 37. So
you're saying CoinRoutes gives you the ability to look at what the market's doing and potentially...
Well, I mean, there's just a wealth of information if you're willing to look for it, and we collect all of that. The other big thing that was fascinating is that all of the talking heads were saying, oh, this rally was going to happen because options market makers are going to gamma hedge. I'm not going to go into a whole diatribe about how option market makers work, although happy to answer questions for anyone who ever cares. To feel free to put comments on the video. But the reality was, when that does happen, if the market was being led by options market makers, one of the things you can count on is that the perpetual swaps on Deribit would have been more bid than all the other perpetual swap markets, because of capital efficiencies. Market makers keep their money there. But that was not the case. In fact, we were looking this morning, and as the market was softening, the Deribit options market makers were the best offer. They were the lowest offer for a pretty consistent period of time, which is indicating softness in the market, but nothing close to the kinds of moves that a lot of the talking heads were talking about. So
what else we got?
Well, there's one other article. I'm curious what you guys think. The Wall Street Journal came out with yet another hit piece on terrorist financing via crypto, with the same flaws as the original one, just with a few different quotes from people.
I mean, for me, it's just so brutal that the Wall Street Journal continues to do this. I mean, let's talk about for a second what instrument or what currency 90-some-odd% of crime is dealt with. It's the U.S. dollar. And it's for the Wall Street Journal to continue to say this just breaks my heart, and it shows how...
It is sad.
Yeah.
It's sad. I don't want to go into the details because there are a lot of people out there working on the very specific rebuttals, but the simple fact of the matter is, when crypto is used, it's easier to trace, full stop. When dollars are used via any method such as cash or prepaid debit cards, or the various and sundry methods that are used manually in a lot of the places where the funding is going on, it is much harder to trace. And so, look, no one's arguing at CoinRoutes that we shouldn't have regulation. No one's arguing at CoinRoutes that we should be supporting terrorists with what we're doing, because that is totally not the case. But it's sad that people want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and that's really it.
I mean, I by no means am a Bitcoin maxi, and I'm happy to talk about any flaws when it comes to crypto companies, crypto being used in a bad way, but the reality is it kind of seems like they're grasping at air right now. And it'd be better if they got ahead and actually got on the ground floor and started talking to crypto companies, get involved with the people using this, and come out with real articles that progress crypto within the US.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, we talked about it last week, you're just going to push innovation offshore.
Right.
People are not, it's here to stay, people are going to use it. So as a country, we need to get involved, we need to regulate it, and we need to get on top of things like this and work in unison with the crypto community, not fight against it with fake news stories.
Amen, brother. Lastly, last piece is we should recap our forecast from last week. So far, Carl's brave forecast of range-bound trading and a rotation into alts is looking pretty good. Bitcoin is definitely up since last week, so my bet with Jacob, well, I haven't won it yet, but we'll see.
He's been on Grubhub all day, checking out
But I have seen nothing to change my mind. We'll put it that way.
Okay, that was my question. What do you think? What are you confident?
So as of right now, I'm not feeling great about my bet, considering Dave's knocking on the doorstep. But what I would expect out of the market this week, I think the filing could be huge.
Yep.
Wednesday, Thursday, I could definitely see it pushing above 40. I do think we're in line for a sharp correction, just because I like being bearish. But we'll see. I could see it going around 40 and then maybe coming back down in the 35 range.
Yeah.
That would be my initial prediction.
You said it, the ETF is going to have a big impact on what happens next.
Well, that'll be Ether led, but the thing it was fascinating to see the entire market move up when
Yeah.
Ether went up.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I look at this very simply. I think that there are enough smart people looking to be into the asset class. The other thing we didn't mention is that the SEC is talking with Grayscale now. It's not a weird, what if. It's they are actually having discussions about how to get it. At this point, we know a Bitcoin ETF is a question of when, not if, and we kind of know that they could do it now, but it's most likely people believe the smart money is on January. So anything before that would be a definite positive surprise. If it takes until January, I mean, do people really care? Because the biggest impact of the ETF, let's be honest, is a long-term impact and people trying to get in front of it.
Or Cointelegraph intern releasing a story that may or may not be true.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, we haven't had one of those recently. But look, markets are going to do what markets are going to do. We can tell you with absolute certainty that there's much more interest in the crypto market, much more trading volume going through various aspects of it.
Certainly.
So,
Awesome.
Exciting times ahead.
enjoy your week, everybody.
This video is coming out Monday. We will catch you guys Friday for an update. Great talking to you guys, and as of always, comment, like, subscribe. We want to hear what you guys think of this, and if there's any topics you feel like we need to cover this Friday, please let us know as well.
So long.